said, somebody has a husband who's a first officer with SkyWest. That's neat. Before I get started, though, I do have two questions. So if you can kind of type your answers into the chat box. The first one is, how many of you have used SwiftUI at all? If you could just put like a thumbs up or a yes if you have, a no if you haven't. Okay. How about, have any of you built a WatchOS application at all, either with SwiftUI or with UIKit? Okay. All right. So we do have a little bit of SwiftUI experience and no WatchOS experience, which helps me because I know kind of how to work this workshop a little bit to better suit your guys's interest. So I am going to share my screen with you, and feel free to code along if you want to, or you could just watch. And I just need to move some stuff around so I can keep an eye on the chat room for questions. And okay. So we're going to open up xCode. We're going to create a new xCode project. I already have it set up, but we want to make it a WatchOS project, and it's going to be a watch app. If it was an application that is connected to your iPhone app, then you would select this option. But since it's just a standalone watch app, we're going to select the watch app option. And I'm just going to call this tip calculator. And we want to make sure that we have SwiftUI set up and not the storyboard. It's, again, a SwiftUI app, not WatchKit. And luckily, the only language option is Swift. We don't want to do notifications, at least we're not for this app. So we'll go ahead and unselect this box. And it's going to ask you where you want to save it. For now, I'm just going to save it on the desktop. Feel free to put it in a folder wherever you want to. So SwiftUI, as you all know, since you've used it in the past, gives you an automatic view of what you're building. So one of the biggest challenges that we have when we're building for the watch is the amount of space. Compared to an iPhone, we have virtually no space at all. So it's kind of good because this way you kind of have to have your design be minimal. Think about only the things that the user needs. I mean, sometimes it's cool to have animations, but is it really necessary? So building for the watch, one thing it's taught me is how to bring my designs, be super minimalistic with it. And of course, my computer's taking forever to run the preview, but we'll just kind of get started, and then hopefully at some point the preview pops up. So with this tip calculator app, it needs to do three things. The first is we need to get the price from the user. We need to have the user enter the percentage that they want to pay. And then the final thing is that we are going to do the math and have the tip amount pop up. And again, we got to keep in mind the amount of space that we have. Yeah, it does take a long time to render. So we're just going to be working on the content view file. We're going to keep our code to one file. That's true, Vue. It does take less time than running the simulator, although it depends on the size of the app. I've come to experience. All right. So the first thing we want to do on our application is we want to get the dollar amount of the meal. There we go. So super tiny space. Right now, all we have is a text. It says hello world. But we need to get the amount in. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a variable to store it. And unlike UIKit, SwiftUI deals with state. So because this is going to be a variable that changes based on the user input, we'll tie it to state. And for now, just so we have something to work with, we'll give it a default value of 35. And we want to display that inside of our body. So we'll just take the hello world part out. We'll put in our variable name, amount. We need our parentheses. And since it's the second time that it's building, it shouldn't take such a long time. Our font here is pretty small, kind of hard to see if you actually had your watch on. That's pretty tiny. So let's remove this padding and let's make our font size a little bit bigger, Okay, so now it's big, but we're dealing with bunny and we have all these extra zeros that we don't really need. So easiest thing to do is to convert that to an int. So we'll just put our int here in between the parentheses, and it'll get rid of the decimals for now. Now we have a nice round number that we can work with. Looking good. So now we have a place for the user to enter their dollar amount. So of course, not every meal is going to be $35. It's going to be more or less, depending on where you go eat. I found that when you're first learning to build applications for the watch, you want to have a way to control your input that makes it easy. For those of you that have a watch, you know that if the keyboard pops up, it's well, not a keyboard because they don't have a keyboard, but the number pads or that scribble thing, it's kind of hard to use. So the best way to control an amount is with a plus or minus, or with a slider. A slider, to me, is probably the makes it easy to use, and everybody knows how to use a slider. Okay, so we have to have a binding, and it's already set up. We have our amount set up. So all we got to do is put a $sign in front of it. So now it will read it and write it. And we'll just say that we'll go from $1 to $100. And we want to increment and decrement by 1. And I had this issue a lot when I first started using SwiftUI, is I'd start adding components and then I'd be like, what's going on? Why is it on separate previews? I don't have two preview windows. I only have one. And it took me a lot of learning. And it's because you could only have one view element in our body at a time. So wrapping it in the VStack, we'll put it all back on one preview window. So there we go. So now we have our number, we have our slider. So if we run it, hopefully it doesn't take too long to run. It's building. So now when it runs in the simulator, we should be able to push the plus and minus and have the dollar amount change. Kind of give it a few more seconds and see if it'll build for us. If at any point you have any questions, any comments, anything that's confusing you, or you need me to speed up, slow down, just throw it out in the chat room and I'll adjust accordingly. Well, it's just been really slow. So we'll just kind of keep going for now. And hopefully yours didn't take as long and you were able to test it out on your own computers. Okay. So we've got our dollar amount. We have a way of increasing and decreasing it. The next thing we want the user to do is to select the tip percentage that they want to leave. So again, we'll start off with another variable. And this is not going to change. It's just going to be an array of possible percentages that the user can select from. So some, let's say they could do 5%, 7%, 10%, 12, 15, 17, 20. So seems to be pretty common percentages that people can use. So those are the ones that the user can select from. And then we're going to have a variable for the one that the user picks. And for testing purposes, we'll just say that we'll start off with 15. Of course, we need the var keyword there. Okay. And let's kind of let this start running so that we can start building. All right. Again, we want to keep this minimal, and let's add a picker with all of our percentages where the user can just scroll up and down and pick the percentage that they want. So one thing I really like about what Apple did with SwiftUI is that they named their things exactly what they were. So slider for slider, picker for picker. Makes it really easy to find what you're looking for. So we'll say this is the tip percentage picker. And it's going to bind with our selected percentage. And what it's going to do is it's going to loop throughout all of our percentages. And of course, when we're dealing with a for loop, it has to have a different ID with a different identifier. And because all of our percentages are different, we'll just use the percentages as that. And now we're looping through all of them, and we want to display them as a text field. So for each percentage, we will put this inside a text field. And because it's a percentage, we'll also add the percent sign. So now maybe this will work better than running it. So now we can go through all our percentages. It doesn't look very great, but it's working. We'll work on making this look better later on. We just kind of want to get it to work, and then we'll fix it up. All right, so now the user can put in their amount. I know was $42. I want to leave. I'm feeling generous, so I want to give them a 20% tip. But how do we get to the next screen? Well, we need to get to our next screen. So we need a button. And the best place to put a button, we don't need this huge area for percentage since it's only 2 digits and a percent sign. So we can kind of squeeze this in and put a button on this side, I think. So we're going to take our picker and make sure I get the right curly brace. I'm going to cut this out for now, put an H stack in. Inside the H stack, I'm going to put my picker. And now we're going to add our navigation link. For now, because we don't have another file created, we're just going to have it take us to a different screen that says tip amount. Okay, so all it says is the word tip. You can put go, you can hit enter, whatever you want. Let's clean up this code a little bit. Okay. Let it compile. Is the $sign not showing in front of amount? Because amount is not in parentheses. So if we want the $sign to appear, we could just put it in there. Thanks, Irina. I didn't even realize I didn't have a money sign on there. Okay, so now $42, 15% tip. We hit the tip button, and all it does is take us to a new screen that says tip amount, just like we coded it to do. So far, it works. We could call it done. We could say, I've got my tip calculator done. It works. It does what I meant it to do. But it's kind of ugly looking. So let's clean it up a little bit. When you look at the watch apps, they usually always have a title of the app up on top here. So let's go ahead and add that first. So at the end of our VStack curly brace, let's add our title. Interactive calculator. All right. So now there's this huge gap of space right here between the dollar amount and our picker. So let's get rid of that. So what we want to do is we want to remove all the space in between our VStack elements. All right, so now that space is gone. Everything's a little bit closer together. Now we want to divide the space between these three elements evenly. So we want to make sure we have enough space around the dollar amount, the picker, and our H stack. So SwiftUI has a thing called Geometry Reader that helps you distribute elements in your view. So we just gotta make sure that we do this inside, and you could do it where you just type it, but I like to just cut it because the curly braces, once you start having a lot of elements embedded inside itself, kind of hard to keep track of where all the curly braces go. So I've always found it easier to just take the code that I want inside the new element that I'm building, whether it's a V stack, a H stack, in this case the geometry, to just cut it, do whatever new element I'm adding, and then just paste it back in. Okay, so now we have everything embedded inside a geometry reader. Now we could start adjusting. So what we're going to do is to each of our elements, so here's our text, we're going to adjust we're going to do the height. We're going to adjust the height of the frame because the width, we just wanted to go from left to right. And because we have three elements, we just want all three of them to take up 1/3 of the size. So we'll just take that same line of code and add it to all three elements. So now when that's done, it looks about even. Can't really tell much. Okay. So now let's go create another file. And because right now, if you remember, we only have it going to where it says text. So let's really quickly Control N, create a new file. It's going to be a SwiftUI view. And let's call it tip view. Have that start running while we code. And we're going to pass two things to it. We're going to pass in the amount of the meal, which is a type double. And we're going to pass in the percentage, which is going to be of type int. Makes our math a little bit easier if we do this as an int than if we try to actually work with percentages. Okay, so now we're going to get this error that says we need to pass in something, otherwise our preview is not going to run. So fix it for me automatically, and we'll just enter some random variables. We'll do 50, and 15. So now that error goes away. Okay. So let's go really quickly back to our content view. And let's change this. So navigation link, destination, what we wanted to do is we no longer wanted to show a text, just a text view. We wanted to go to our tip view file, and we need to pass in the amount and what did I call it? Selected percentage. Okay, so now it's going to take the amount from what was entered, the selected percentage from the picker view, and it's going to send that to our tip view. And I'm going to put it up here. Makes it easier to go back and forth between the two files. Okay, so now in our tip view, we're going to get the amount and the tip percentage. So we need to do something with it. And just for readability purposes, I know we could do this inside the body, but I have found that for me, it works better if I have my actual logic and work inside of a separate function. You can do whatever works for you. And so it's going to give back a string because it's going to make it easier to put it inside of our body here. So let's do some math, some quick math. So our tip amount is going to be the amount. And because right now our tip percentage is of type int, and you can't do math with an int and a double, so one of them has to be casted as the other one. So we'll just do tip percentage, and it doesn't have a decimal point, so we'll just divide by 100 to add. And then it wants to work with doubles only since everything's a double. So that we're going to ignore this missing return because we're still not done doing our math. All right, so that gives us our tip amount. And now let's convert that into a string. String is misspelled. All right, so we can tell it that we want it formatted a certain way, and we want our value to have 2 decimal points, and it's going to be tip amount. So we got our tip amount, we converted it to a string. So now let's return it with a $sign and tip amount string. Oh, shouldn't have them be the same here. Tip amount string. Okay, so we have our function that calculates it. Now we just need to pass it into our body. And since we don't really have anything else inside of our body, all we're gonna have is just the tip amount. We don't have to do a VStack. You could if you wanted to add something else. But for now, we're just gonna keep it simple. So all we're gonna do is call our function. And while that's kind of running, I'm gonna make our size of our font same size as the one from before. there you go. So it's working with the $50 and 15% tip. And so there you go. So now, hopefully, if I run this, it will be a lot quicker and we could actually make sure everything works properly. All right. So 57, 7% tip, hit the tip button, and we leave $4.06 tip. And does anybody have any questions? Before I do that though, there's this tip percentage there that's kind of making this look a little wonky. So let's go back, and that's a part of our picker. So where's our picker? Let's get rid of that. It's called label is hidden. So let's stop this. Okay, now they're more aligned. That looks much better. Does anybody have any questions? Anything that is confusing? Anything you need explained?
Erica asked a couple of minutes ago if you've ever built watch apps with UIKit and if there are any differences in complexity or your preferences between the two.
I tried building watch apps with UIKit, and let me tell you, it is so much harder to build a watch app with UIKit than a iPhone app. I don't know what it is about the watch. It's not as intuitive. So when SwiftUI came out, and it's so much easier to build it using SwiftUI. I think it's just because of the fluidity that makes it easier. I kind of gave up building watch apps with UIKit. I didn't like it. It was hard. I stuck with iPhones and iPads, and it wasn't until SwiftUI came out that I gave it another chance and found that so much easier. So for watch, I'm definitely gonna stick with SwiftUI. iPhone and iPad, either one, depending on the situation. Was there another question that I missed in there?
Nope, you should be up to date.
Okay. How much time do I have left, Sierra?
You have until 3:55. So another 40 minutes, 45 minutes.
Oh, I thought it was only a 15-minute workshop.
We have the whole second session too. So you're free to continue on until the end of session 3, which ends at, or session 4, which ends at 3:55. So okay. You have some extra time to work with.
All right. So then what we can do with this app is we can tie it to the digital crown. We can use our scrolly crown instead of tapping. So inside of content view, this is where we're going to make that change. And let's start off with making our text. Instead of using the slider, we're going to use the digital crown. So that's a pretty easy change to do. We're going to get rid of the crown itself. I mean the slider. We're just going to delete it off. I'm going to need that one. We have that one twice. Okay. We're going to have the digital crown control both the tip and the dollar amount. So we need to let it know which one the user selected. And with that, we use focusable. So now whichever one the user taps on is the one that is going to be the one that the digital crown is going to control. Okay, so now let's add digital crown rotation. And again, we're working with the amount, and because we want to write and read from it, we made it bindable. And we're going to start at, we'll start at $1 again. And let's have it go all the way from $1 to $500. And every time it increments, we're going to have it increment by 1. And because we're going from such a high range from 1 to 500, we don't want to have it to go one full rotation to do one increment. So we're going to set the sensitivity to high. And we don't want it to, once it reaches 500, to go back to 1. So that's what this is continuous that we're setting is. Focus upward. It helps when you spell things correctly. And that is all that we need to do to the text to make it work with the digital crown. So let's run this and test it, make sure it works. Okay. So one thing, you can tell when I click on the tip because it turns green, but when I click on the 35, this thing goes white saying it got deselected, but there's really no way of knowing that the 35 got selected unless I went ahead and just started scrolling. But that's not really good UI. That's going to confuse some users. So let's go in and add a border around the dollar amount, just to make it easier for our users to use. So we're going to add a, let's add a variable that will let us know which one of the two items is the one that is being focused on, or that the amount is being focused on. And we'll just set it to false to start off with. So now here, when the user selects it, we're going to set amount focused. And that's just going to change it from true to false. And since it's only one line, we'll just keep it all in one line. Keep our code plain. And now underneath our digital crown rotation, let's add an overlay of a rectangle. Corner radius 10. With the border, I think it's this one. I always get the borders ones confused. Okay, so if amount focused is true, we'll do green. And if not, we'll do white. And line width, we'll try 1 for now. Give it some time to catch up. So what stroke border does that's different from the other borders is that we can set preview first. You know, it changes based on, in our case, on the amount focus, but it could be anything you want on your code. Okay, so we've got our border. Looks like we need some padding, so we'll add some padding. But now, when we select our tip, that turns white. And when we select that, that turns green and that turns white. So the functionality works, but that just doesn't look right. We probably want this border to go all the way to the edges. So let's find our frame here. Since we no longer have 3 elements, let's just go ahead and get rid of that. Let's add some padding. Padding all the way around. And let's have it go. Let's adjust our width this time. We have a lot of room vertically now with us removing the slider. Let's just make sure that it goes all the way from one edge to the other. So eventually when our preview catches up to what we did, it should look a lot cleaner. All right. Okay. So that looks better. Now it goes from the edge here to the other edge. But we don't have a lot of room in between the text view and our H stack. So let's just add a little bit of padding. And let's see. Make sure we add it to the right space. I don't want padding all the way in the top or the sides. I just want some added to the bottom. And now my computer is really struggling right now. There we go. Okay, so we got a little bit of space here. Makes it look cleaner. We got our button. It's looking good. Okay. So one thing that this does, and to show it to you, I will run this, is that when we select between the tip and the dollar amount, if we click anywhere in the outside area of padding, it doesn't do anything. So if I go to tip and then I click on the side here, it's not going to change until I click inside, which again is not a good thing for our users because they're going to think it's broken or frozen, and then all they're going to do is just delete your app. So luckily it's a very simple fix. So after focusable here, it's just basically telling xCode to use the whole entire rectangle as a selection. So now when I select my tip, let's change a different tip, and I click in this black area, and did I type something wrong? Oh, order of operations is a big thing with SwiftUI. Before we set it to focusable, we need to tell it the area that we want it to focus on. So because I had this after it had already focused, yeah. So when things kind of look right and they just don't work the way you thought it was supposed to work, check the order in which you do things, the modifiers, because lots and lots of headaches could be prevented if you put things the way xCode basically wants you to. So now, there we go. Now it works. I can click on anywhere in that rectangle and it'll switch. And now our tip calculator is pretty much done, and it's all controlled by the digital crown. Any comments, questions? Anything anybody needs me to go over again? No, we have extra time, but that is all I had really prepared for the workshop. I thought it was 50 minutes. So I will leave it open for anybody if you guys have questions, comments, anything.
Is your project available online, the code for it, that you can post a link to?
It is not yet. I need to clean it up a little bit, but it will be by the end of the day. And it's going to be on my blog site.
We can also post a link in the Women Who Code Mobile Slack for folks who haven't joined. You can join our Slack channel through the expo. There's a link to join the.
That's going to be where it's going to be. It's going to be the newest blog post that will be on there. And everything we went through today with images will be on there if anybody wants to go over it again, or if there's something that you missed. Yeah, so in a few hours, it'll be up there.
Does anyone else have any questions before we start wrapping up? I know you got a lot of really great feedback from folks throughout your presentation. That was really well done. I learned a lot. I don't know a lot of Swift. I only know a tiny bit of Swift UI, so it was fun watching something that I knew enough that I could like follow along on the iOS side.
It helps when you teach kids.
I bet, yeah.
Because if you can have a teenager pay attention and follow along, then adults is easier because they want to be there when sometimes kids are forced to be there.
I believe that.
So you already practice teaching workshops, teach it to kids. Your patience will be tested.
My patience is tested when interacting with adults. I assume that your link to your blog is the second link you posted. The actual link is just TH.
Yeah, it's THE, the.
So I think we're gonna go ahead and start wrapping up. There's some other sessions going on for this. I think we're in session 3, and then there'll be another set of sessions that start at 4 p.m. So you can slide into the end of one of the round 4. We're in round 4 talks that are still going on, and Claudia and I can hang out for a few more minutes and see if any last minute questions come in. We're going to have to get you to do another SwiftUI presentation for the mobile track events.
Yeah, definitely. I didn't die during this one, so I think I can do it again.
I think you can. I'm pretty confident having watched it. That's my favorite thing about this particular is there's so many mobile folks talking. I can go in and sneak in on all their presentations, be like, should I get them to come talk for us? Yes, of course I should. Laurie just posted a question for you, Claudia. She missed the first part, but is wondering if you recommend Swift over Objective-C for WatchOS apps.
Lori, yes. And I would definitely recommend SwiftUI over UIKit for WatchOS. The layout is much easier with SwiftUI than with the storyboard, just because of the small size of the screen. With SwiftUI, you automatically get it adjusted, where with UIKit, you have to use auto layout, and it was a lot more complicated. And if Apple ever adds a different screen size, right now there's only 2, but if they decide that they're going to add more screen sizes like they did with the new iPhones, then SwiftUI will be really helpful with that than Objective-C and UIKit.
How did you start learning SwiftUI, Claudia? Were there any specific blogs or resources that you looked at?
I started with Paul Hudson's 100 Days of SwiftUI.
I think they're actually starting that again in our Slack channel.
Yeah, it's really helpful. The way he breaks things down makes it easy to understand and follow along. And besides, it's free. You can't get better than
Too
free.
true. So if you're ready, we can, I think we've got all our questions, we can go ahead and move on to the other sessions.
All right.
Thank you,
Sierra.
Claudia. Thank you so much.